I first acknowledge that I'm on Wurundjeri land of the Kulin Nation, and thank you, David, for that acknowledgement of country. And I'd just like to pay my respects to elders and particularly the Aboriginal people who are here today. Yes, at the coalface. Well, it seems that I have been banging my head against said coalface for quite some time. And certainly in my time in Parliament since 2014, I have regularly put up amendments to road safety legislation to try and enable medicinal cannabis patients to be treated like any other patient. That said, that if they are using a medicine as prescribed by their doctor and they are not impaired then they should be able to drive. As all of you have succinctly put, that's not the case. In 2019, I put up a bill, the Road Safety Amendment Bill, which really was a very modest approach, and it very much mirrored Tasmania. And effectively, it just said if you have a prescription for cannabis and you were pulled over at a roadside test, and your test positive would be your prescription would be a defence to a drug driving charge. The government wasn't prepared to support that bill at the time, but they were prepared to allow us to have a task force to consider this. So we had a fairly large task force that included doctors, it included police, it included road safety experts, it included people from TAC, it included people from forensic medicine, included people from a whole range of areas to discuss this. And it became evident fairly early on that the police were not interested in change in Victoria in this circumstance. And Thomas, we presented so much of the evidence and the great work that you and your colleagues have been doing. We presented the evidence of patients. I spoke about a person I knew who had a young man who had epilepsy and medicinal cannabis, and certainly it was a predominantly CBD product. Once using that, he was seizure-free for 2 years, which meant that he could qualify to get his licence. And that would have been the first time that this young man who lived in regional Victoria would have had the independence of driving. But because there were possible traces of THC in the medicine that he was taking, he couldn't get a driver's licence. And it was heartbreaking hearing that story. So we did the task force. The task force produced a report, which I'm happy to share with people if they're interested in it. It covered the research. It looked at the options of what we could do, similar to what Teresa probably does with patients all of the time, which is have a conversation about the medication that they're using and the side effects of that medication, and advice on whether it's safe to drive or use heavy machinery or work or whatever that might be. The task force could not come to a consensus on the way forward. There was quite a body of work done into a risk tree for prescribers, but we just were very blocked in the mindset of the police that were represented in that task force. And it was really quite disappointing. And it was, the task force sort of finished. I think it was quite a good report, but it didn't come to any form of consensus. Since then, we've continued to advocate, and quite recently, in fact, just last week, we had some patients who were suffering from endometriosis, and they were speaking to the health minister and to other ministers, and without even my prompting, which I normally would have done, they talked about the fact that medicinal cannabis has been an extraordinary medication for treating their pain of endometriosis, but they can only take it when they're on holidays because they have to drive. And so here we have a medication that is providing extraordinary relief, preventing these women from attending the emergency room almost on a monthly basis because of the pain associated with their endometriosis, being denied or not able to take a medication that has provided them with extraordinary relief. The conversation continues, and the legislation, the bill that I introduced in 2019 is still there. I think we have made progress. I think there is greater and greater understanding of medicinal cannabis. I think the work that Thomas has been doing, it has been terrific in demystifying the impacts and effects of cannabis on driving. But again, when we go back to those numbers, we are talking about a very small cohort of people who are using this medicine, using cannabis as a medicine. And I'm hopeful that we may see some progress this year. I'm encouraged. I also understand that the federal body, the Drug Control Advisory Group, I understand that they've also been looking at this issue, and that was discussed at a number of their meetings as well. So I do believe that there's progress. I'm really pleased to see that the New South Wales Upper House is doing this, adding to the work that already has been done. However, I'd have to say Tasmania has shown us, I would say, the evidence that we need, that we haven't seen an escalation in road deaths. We haven't seen an escalation in accidents from medicinal cannabis patients. And I think it's completely preposterous. And, some people start talking conspiracy theories about, the whole range of things. And, it just doesn't make sense that we're not changing these laws. I don't think it makes sense when I speak privately to members of parliament. But how we turn this corner, whether I can convince them, one of the things that we've been advocating for in Victoria is maybe a trial. So maybe have 100 patients that have been prescribed medicinal cannabis, and they are monitored for a year, and to see if they have had an increased accident rate, or I don't know what we would be monitoring, because I'm fairly certain nothing would happen. However, that's where we are here in Victoria.